Good to meet you.
It's good to meet you too. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, my pleasure. Are you kidding me? This is like, mutual.
Mutual Appreciation Society?
Well, for sure, even beyond maybe like starstruck awe kind of thing.
You mean from me to you?
No, but I saw that coming. Or maybe it's who can be the most self-deprecating contest.
Probably. Yeah, let's not do that. That's let's just be mutually confident of our respective abilities.
Right. And we both contributing or well, we're both I think contributing some positive art or whatever we
Maybe.
want to call it, or media to the landscape out there. And that's about as much as I'll pat myself on the back, but I feel like I you know tried to contribute a certain amount of positivity,
Mm-hmm.
if nothing else, information,
Absolutely.
you know and trying to champion films and work that doesn't normally get as much attention.
Right.
But I don't remember how I first came across I have no idea, no memory of that, but I'm
I
so
don't
glad I
either.
did.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, as you know, it's such a strange thing to like when I think about the way I consume podcasts, it's not like I reach out to every podcaster that I like. I'm like,
No.
if anything, probably 99.9% of them, it's like I may listen faithfully, religiously, but like I'm not I'm not reaching out. It's like radio call-in shows. They say there's like 1% of the people who listen to the radio show actually bother to call in.
Right.
So whenever anybody expresses direct kind of like appreciation for what you're doing, as you know, it's like it's hard to put into words how great that is, because a lot of the times you can look at the numbers or everything, but uh, especially with more like personal episodes, you don't know if does anyone really get it? So when you hear anything like that, or anyone says like, "Hey, I really get it," you can I think tell when it's authentic, and then B, it just gives me sort of like fuel for continuing to do it. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that when
Right.
anybody says
Well,
that.
right, because I think essentially, in terms of the size of what my audience has shrunk down to, uh, just because of the sheer number of podcasts out there.
Right.
It's essentially, I don't know if I should advertise this, but it's kind of like, a vanity project on some
Right.
level. I mean,
Yeah.
I can look at it through different, through prism in different perspectives, like
Hmm.
it's, yes, I also help promote and champion it, certain projects and things out there, for sure. And then on another level though, how much am I really impacting,
Right.
So, but I like to think, over the years a little
Yeah.
bit. Uh, yeah. So, um, wow. It's what I'm really impressed with. I mean, is and when I want to kind of get back to, I want to get to your history and your experiences, and find out more about you.
Hmm.
But I just want to start off by saying this podcast you do, Full Cast and Crew. First of all, how frequent does it come out?
I try to put one out every week. I
Right.
don't always do that. Right now, I'm in a lull of it's going to be, I put out episodes the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks pretty regularly on Tuesdays, typically.
Right.
Um, this week, timing wise, just didn't work out. So I'm going to be recording tomorrow for next week. So I try to be weekly. I've tried to always do that.
Yeah.
I think that's important. But I've gone, sometimes 3 or 4 weeks
Yeah.
without releasing one. It just kind of depends. I find that I get into a rhythm and kind of a like a flow of things that I'm interested in that leads to other things,
Yes.
and then
Right.
I kind
Yeah.
of ride that for a bit, and then sometimes I have to take a break just to kind of recharge and then get inspired by something again. So I kind of allow that to happen if it needs to happen. I don't try to force it too often.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to do every week. I mean, I think that's
Okay.
I always refer to that as like the tyranny of podcasting, right? Which is, it sounds great for everyone to do it,
Yeah.
but if you do want to build any kind of an audience, you have to do it regularly. and you have to be okay with, as I frequently say, literally growing one listener at a time. Like
Mhm.
that's, I don't really market as well as probably I could or many people do, but I do find that word of mouth is the biggest way that I get new listeners, and that's also meaningful, I think, because it means someone is taking the time to say like, "Oh, you should listen to this. This guy's good." Um,
Yeah.
so,
Right. In other words, not in a sort of maybe inorganic methods of where,
yeah,
I don't know what they would look like necessarily. Maybe um, being a part of a network, or maybe certain types of sponsorships and things of that nature, which kind of,
yeah.
yeah,
I always enjoy saying, not. I pride myself not being a part of the podcast industrial complex.
yeah. I've heard you say that. And okay, so and when did you begin this podcast? When did
I
it?
think I think we
What's the
started
origins?
doing. I think we started the origins were so I have a production company in New York City, TV production company, content production company, and have had for many years since 2007.
This is
And
Meeting House.
Meeting House Productions, and we've been around a long time now for an independent production company. And I think in 2018 is when I sort of said, we should do a podcast just to become facile at the mechanics of making something like this and the distribution methods, because it's completely different from what we do as a business. And it's funny to think that that's not so long ago, but at that time, that was kind of like podcasts were in the news a lot as a big business that was kind of like, wow, you got to get good at this if you're going to make content.
Right.
And so it really started. I mean, clearly, if I was trying to stand out and separate from a pack, I never would have chosen movies as a as a subject for a
Right.
podcast,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's probably more of those than there are anything else in the world. But it just started as something that we could try to do as a production company. So for the first year of the podcast, I had a colleague of mine, Chris, who was a co-host with me, and he did all the work. I mean, I watched the movies and prepared, but he did the recording and the editing. And when he moved on to other things, I took that part on, sort of not literally not knowing how to do any of that stuff, and had to have that learning curve, which turned out to be fantastic. And the best thing that could have happened was, learning to do it myself, for better or for worse. I'm not great at
Mhm.
it, but I've gone through a bunch of iterations of how I record and what I use and all that stuff. And that's become part of what's great about it, is just that something I get to make. It doesn't touch the infrastructure of the company. It's not like the company makes it. We used to have somebody mix it who mixes all of our shows and things of that nature, but I really do all that now in whatever rudimentary fashion I'm able to do. And so it just started from there, and then it kind of became just a fun creative outlet. When you're running a company and your day to day is not so much on the creative anymore, because other people are doing that, have their hands in that day to day. My job here at Meeting House is much more about developing future opportunities for the company and the business of the company and all of that stuff, which I actually really like. But this is just something that I get to do for myself, that is just an outlet for what I'm
Mhm.
already doing, which is
Sure.
watching movies
Right.
primarily, some TV
Yeah.
shows. So,
Yeah. And I guess, it forces you though to, well, what I'm going to guess is that because you do this podcast, it creates maybe or the content that you're talking about, the movies and the TV shows and sometimes books and
mhm.
music as well, that it it forces you to process these things much more deeper in a nuanced way, so you can talk about them in a very, robust kind of way like you do on the
Mhm.
podcast. So I think it makes the stuff more meaningful. That's kind of been my experience. And and the more latter years that I've been doing my podcast, I find that I've got less more of a for hunger and an appetite for being choosier
Hmm.
and trying to find stuff that's really, really, really meaningful. So,
Yes.
and I sometimes, there's exceptions, but almost entirely now I'm trying to make it so folks, so everything really has a deeper
Hmm.
meaning to me. So I don't know, like, and I should also just mention to people if they're watching or listening, like that, your show again, it's called Full Cast and Crew. I am not experienced a single host, like somebody who's just talks into a microphone.
Hmm.
Um, and you don't know who's on the other receiving end or the other side of that.
Right.
I've never heard somebody who's really able to really speak so fluidly and person and make things very personal and also uh what am I trying relatable,
Mm,
to
yeah.
for other people, and it's like you do like I just I was listening to the Warren Zevon episode, which was one of your most recent,
Hmm.
and it really kind of lit the flame under me. Like I really got to reach out to you and bring you on because I do want to kind of pick your brain about this because it's like I've
Yeah.
heard in a bunch of shows where you've just done them alone, and I'm like, how does he do that? I can never pull that off. I just can't do it. Like, and I am on the radio, but I'm on talking into a mic and I know there are people listening
Hmm.
and I'm just talking for very brief moments and I'm usually promoting things or talking about songs and music
Right.
at my job. But with the podcast, I'm talking to other people all the time. I don't really, other than
Right.
little intros, I don't, and even now that I'm doing with other people because I've moved into a studio with
Right.
producers and
Yeah.
and I
They're
much
there.
more,
Yeah.
I enjoy the social nature of doing that and not doing it on my own. So
Mm.
anyway, but so to get back to my question, how in hell are you doing that? And how much preparation? Talk about your process. Talk about like
Sure.
take as a case study the Warren Zevon episode,
Sure.
which people should, go definitely just put a pause this and just listen to the 2 hour show that you did. And that, and then come back and hear you talk about your
Yeah. Come
process
back or
again.
don't, depending on whether you like it or not. It depends, right? Yeah. It's funny. I don't know how it evolved that I started sort of doing some episodes where it's just me talking, because if I looked back, probably for most of the episodes in the first few years, it's probably always sort of guest dependent, like
Yeah.
getting people to come on and having recurring people, which I still do, and I love that back and forth.
Right.
Um, and but to your earlier point about kind of waiting to be inspired or being more selective in what you do or don't do, for me, since this is what it is for me, it's like I have a full life. I have a family. I have a business that I run. I have other interests and hobbies and things that I spend time doing. So if I'm going to spend the time to do this, it's going to have to be something that I'm genuinely moved by. And if there's any, secret, quote unquote, it's just that I am moved by all
Yeah.
the things that I choose to do.
And it
And
comes
so,
across, and it
well,
really
thank
comes
you.
across. I mean, when you're talking about, I could see how personal it is for you, even though you're not talking about yourself.
Right. No, I
Um,
mean, the Zevon one came about in an unexpected way, because I think I saw. Um, so before Zevon, I had done something I also hadn't done before, which was I did Fast Times at Ridgemont High with my friend Ted Jessup, and we did an episode covering as much of the movie as we could. And then I still had more that I was moved by in Sean Penn's performance of Spicoli, and so I recorded kind of with some fear and trepidation of like, this could possibly be a terrible idea to follow up an episode about a movie with another episode about the same movie. But I kind of wanted to go even deeper. And so I did an episode which was all 22 of the Spicoli scenes from Fast Times, where I just kind of went through them all and talked about what aspects of Sean Penn's performance I found amazing and worthy of real respect as acting, and not just kind of what happens a lot of time, which is like performances in quote unquote comedy films don't really get respect for
right.
the acting, when there are performances in that film that are deserving of that. So I went down that rabbit hole. And then somehow after that, I saw on Twitter somebody posted something about Zevon on let. Oh no, you know what it was? I read an article in Vulture,
Oh yeah, that's right.
which was Letterman talking about Zevon, and I was like, this is the impetus of an entire episode here, and much of what I talked about in that episode is contained in this first spark of kind of recognition, which was, on the one hand, I thought it was strange that David Letterman was participating in this Vulture piece, because I don't want to say it seemed beneath someone of his stature, but it got my attention because he was taking the time to talk about something that clearly was very meaningful and moving to him, which was this.
Yeah.
I would hesitate to even call it a relationship, because there's no evidence that they really had a friendship outside the appearances on the show or spent time together outside of those things. But knowing as much as I do about Letterman and having read Crystal Zevon's book previous to encountering this article,
That's his late wife.
that's, well, yeah, that's
His late ex-wife, I should say.
well, she's still alive, but
No, I mean, oh, right, she's alive. So excuse me, his ex-wife.
She's yes, she is his ex-wife,
and I guess non-widow, or just
I don't know.
widow adjacent or something.
Yeah, she's a widow adjacent. But I had read that book, and so in reading Letterman's comments about, he was talking about, I guess it came out because there was this movement, sort of, Warren Zevon was up for election to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right.
And that's why he was doing it, was to play a part in,
well, there you go,
trying to get, attention for this guy to be in a place where he obviously should be. So I read that, and then it also struck me, I've always said, and I've mentioned it on the pod before, that book is a very harrowing read, and I'm a huge consumer of books about the entertainment business and
me too,
and biographies and all of these kinds of things, and particularly oral biographies. I really, really get a lot out of and enjoy, and so I thought, wow, that's something I've never really done on the pod. I should. This is a great thing. And then, having done the Spicoli thing, I was kind of, and people really loved this weird format thing where it wasn't really about a movie. It was just about the 22 Spicoli scenes. And I thought, oh, well, here's, I can do all the times that Zevon guested on Letterman leading up to this great emotional conclusion, which is his final appearance, which is it's kind of one of the most iconic talk show TV moments in history. And so that was kind of the start of it. And then you asked about my preparation. I just reread Crystal's book, and I watched all of the Zevon appearances where there was some interaction between him and Dave. And then I just get curious about various things that come up. In that, I was really curious about these two men who really, by their own admission, and this felt important at the time. I think I mentioned this in a couple of posts about the piece, that I didn't want to do like a salacious, gossipy piece about this. It felt important to use primary sources, in the sense that I used this interview that Dave gave to Jesse Thorne, where he was very...
This is the Vulture article.
No, the Vulture article was separate. And then there's an audio interview that Dave did with...
right. That's right.
With Jesse Thorne,
yes.
Where he was like really open in a way that I've never... Like, I'm a student of David Letterman, so I'd never heard him kind of talk about some of the things that he talked about in this 2020 interview, I think, with Jesse Thorne. He's talking about his alcoholism. He's talking about his flaws as a human being during the making of the show. He addressed his scandal, the blackmail scandal. And so on the one hand, you have Warren Zevon, who didn't get to grow
right
as a human and as a person because of his own choices and choices he wasn't able to make in overcoming the demons that he struggled with. And then with Letterman, you have a guy who does seem to be growing, kind of after he leaves behind the showbiz thing that defined, in his own words, his whole reason for being. And so I found that juxtaposition pretty fascinating, and watching them try to communicate with each other. There's like, people love those clips, but as I jumped to it, I was like, God, these are so bristling with a certain awkward tension. It's like two guys who can't really express themselves verbally in a great way.
Or have complex relationships with themselves.
Yeah, very complex relationships with themselves.
Well, I kind of looked at as Letterman, like the Netflix series as being much closer to what he
Yes.
would have envisioned for himself had he had, had better control over his trajectory from at the start. He was like in a court work for corporations. And so,
Hmm.
not that
Hmm.
Netflix isn't a corporation, but he's at the point now where he has complete control,
Right.
obviously. But that he was like, promoting
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
he didn't really care about. And so
Right.
when somebody came on like Warren, who he did,
Hmm.
I think that's what we witness, and it stands out just for that
Right.
reason. And and then certainly it makes sense that he's out there again, considering that, or rather, since Warren Zevon's being considered for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, is
Yeah, which you didn't
uh,
get into, by the way, which
yeah,
is, I
since
stay out
then.
of,
I mean,
you talk about sort of
yeah,
the avoiding the
oh,
negativity. It's like that's such a cesspool on the internet of like people freaking out over who did get in, over people they think should get in. I mean, of course, the whole thing is a ridiculous construct to begin with, but
yeah,
if you are going to have such a thing, it's kind of crazy that a songwriter of that skill and ability isn't in there. But at the same time, he did not endear himself to the industry, nor Jan Wenner, who is a pretty powerful figure in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I think had a pretty famous kind of falling out with Zevon.
oh, okay,
And maybe that plays a part in it. I don't know. That's just speculation, but
yeah.
yeah. So that
Well, you probably,
that
yeah, he pissed off a lot of people, but I mean, it's been 30 years or something. I don't
yeah,
know.
you would think, but
Yeah,
maybe next year. So
yeah. Well,
that,
eventually,
yeah,
seems likely.
that's kind of like, that's a typical process where there's just something that I'll encounter in my own kind of voracious consumption. I think the one question I get asked the most by people is, how do you have time to read and watch these things? And really the answer is that it's not
Oh,
extra on top of my other watching and reading. That is my
yeah,
reading and watching,
right, right. Me too.
so it
Yeah,
doesn't, I
right.
don't feel that it's, I don't waste a lot of time consuming stuff that doesn't give me an opportunity to get into it. So if it's whether it's rewatching something or reading something that's about something I'm interested in, it's kind of the stuff I'm doing anyway. And then yeah, I'm always alert for like, wow, this could be a subject for an episode, because I was moved by this. I don't know if you saw this film that came out called Linoleum with um, Jim Gaffigan. It's a very small
Yeah,
movie that just came
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. I think I may have gotten him on the podcast actually for that.
I mean, it's a brilliant movie that just
Yeah.
got no attention. And I saw that movie in the movie theater, and I was like, I was having the experience of like, this is a podcast subject, because this is such a rich, rewarding film going experience, but no one will have seen it. And sometimes I think there are episodes where you think this would be a great episode, but like to listen to me talk about it for an hour, maybe I'll inspire someone to go see it. But if you don't have that kind of common base of knowledge, I find with things like that, kind of more immediate pop culture things,
Yeah,
it can
well,
be difficult. But
talk
it's a
about it.
great
Yeah,
movie.
tell me about it rather. I mean, that's all I do is talk about things that aren't out yet or that are just becoming available, but they're
Yeah,
obscure, you
it's
know.
tough.
But yeah,
But I mean, at least you have people to interact and speak with. I mean, if I was
right.
going to do
Yeah.
Linoleum, I mean, that's a movie where, I probably could have reached out to the director and he would probably agree to come on,
Oh, yeah,
because I
I'm
think
sure.
any publicity would be great for a film like that. But if anybody is looking for a current, really interesting, good movie, I recommend they go check that out. I think it's also hampered by the title. It's not a great title for what it is. It's kind of a movie that would be it's very hard to trailer that movie. I'm going to be
Hmm.
doing Nashville with my friend Rick tomorrow for next week's episode, which is similarly a very difficult to trailer film. And the trailer that the studio made in 1975 to try to tell people what Nashville was, Robert Altman's Nashville, is like so hilarious, because it's kind of all you could do to try to explain to a viewer what this thing is about, because it's not a linear narrative film. It doesn't have stars per se. It's got 24 major roles. And Linoleum is kind of a similar thing. Is like you really can't put an effective trailer together for a film like that that's as good as it is. And that's kind of unfortunate, because we're just living in a time where it's very, very hard for something good like that to just
Right.
catch whatever spark it needs to catch to break through.
Definitely. Yeah. Um, I was interested if I was thinking about Nashville and about that time when it came out, and you know, very much of its time because this was not long after the Kennedy assassinations, MLK,
Hmm.
and it was during Watergate. And so there were this crop of films that are, all pretty iconic that took place with a sub or a theme, or rather with a subplot of an election going on,
Hmm. Hmm.
or involved, like some sort of candidate for an election
Right.
at that time. Uh, you know, from Taxi Driver to
Hmm.
Parallax View and a bunch of other films.
Parallax
Uh,
view right here.
that's right,
Got
it's
the
right there.
modern parallax view poster. And the
Yeah,
yeah, I love that era. I love those films. That's my sweet spot. Is those 70s thinking films that
sure.
still have movie stars in them and are big studio films, even as they're as weird and underground as they kind of are in their DNA.
Dark,
Um,
very dark.
Very dark, and just that that questioning aspect of all of our institutions and the people that are supposed to be in charge, which is kind of ironic or sad that we really haven't made that much progress, I guess, in the ensuing 50 or 60 years, as we're still coming to terms with the fact that our institutions frequently fail us
Yeah.
or are corrupt. So yeah, I love that era, and there's so many films in that era. And then Nashville, which is always interesting to rewatch films and have. Sometimes what happens is, and I'm fascinated by this when it occurs. Like uh, I think I sort of talked about this most controversially for with Coppola and Apocalypse Now, which I sort of posit is really not a good movie, despite the fact that we're all supposed to worship the ground that it walks on, and it has vibe times 100. I totally get that, but as a piece of like filmmaking, it's really not very good. And there are superior Vietnam films to it
Well,
that
it's
we
mm,
talked about, and it's just there are these canards, these things that you're supposed to think and believe if you really are into movies, and some of them don't prove to be true and are worthy of kind of deflation. Of course, my personality is I don't want to seek that out, but when it occurs, I want to be honest about it.
mhm. Well, I mean, again, it's a subjective experience that
Hmm.
have a knack for being able to convey. And I mean, I don't agree with you about Apocalypse Now, but I
No
appreciate.
one does.
Well, I just watched it.
It's a
My
lonely island.
partner is a teacher, and she was teaching Heart of Darkness, and so for the
Hmm.
students, she had them watch, and she had to watch it ahead again. And I've seen it, I
Yeah,
don't know, half a
100
dozen. No,
times. Yeah.
no,
No.
about 7 or 8
Right.
times, maybe. Um,
Well,
there's
let me
different
ask you what did
incarnations.
you love about it? What were you moved by about Apocalypse Now?
Um, I think just the commitment, of the film, just the commitment of Coppola. I look at it like, Coppola, um, as sort of putting himself in out there, and really risking like his sanity almost to make that film, and it comes across. I feel, it's just and it's just beautiful to me. It's just
Hmm.
on so many levels. It's a very beautiful film.
Yeah.
uh, you know, and I still, well, as any good film, of course, even though maybe I watched it over and over, I forget complete passages of it, and
Right.
it's like seeing them again for the first time and noticing new things, of course. But I think it's pretty realized, as a story. Um, I think it has a strong spine to it.
Yeah,
And some just great, unbelievable moments, also, like,
it definitely has great moments. There's no
I
question.
mean, Duval is,
Duvall's brilliant.
spectacular.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just never tire of seeing those scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, there's movies where you kind of go, oh, like I really don't. I'm not buying into this movie as much as as I thought I did, or I think I'm supposed
Yeah.
to.
Right.
And you do kind of have this quandary where you're kind of like, okay, so how am I going to talk about this movie,
Hmm.
in a way that isn't just knee jerk and kind of stupid or
Right.
reactionary, but honest about, where I find the shortcomings might be. And when we were doing Nashville, I've had a really weird experience rewatching Nashville, and I've done a couple other Altman films and read a lot about Altman and
Hmm.
admire a lot about Altman. And I did have this little bit of a similar experience where I kind of watched Nashville again the first time in preparation for the podcast. And usually what I try to do is I don't want to take notes the first time I'm rewatching or watching. I want to just have the experience of watching it.
Yeah.
I
Makes
don't want
sense.
to, it's a different way to watch it, and I want to
Yeah.
have that experience. If I'm going to have an experience, I want to have the experience. So I do that first. And when I did that first for Nashville, I was kind of like, oh, don't, not sure I like this as much as I thought I did. Kind of
Mm.
messy, kind of not a,
Well,
maybe even not a great Altman film. Um, and, and so I kind of went through that a little bit. And then my friend Rick, who I'm doing the episode with, we both read this book about the making of the movie. I have there's a oral biography of Altman that's really good. I reread those portions again,
right.
and then kind of watched it again just the other day with a different kind of mindset of kind of
Mhm.
like, okay, it's not this like totemic statement about America. It's like a really dark comedy about this town that he has kind of a dismissive attitude about. And
Mhm.
as a collection of scenes, there are
Well, it's like
some
Henry Gibson
Henry Gibson.
represents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, that's part of the fun of it is, right, is watching things a
Yeah.
few
Well,
times and
and
then
I think
figuring out what you
messiness
want to own.
and I think messiness is the point. I mean, that's the way I interpret it. Like, messiness is the point of that film, and to some degree, maybe it's true for Apocalypse Now as well. But I
Yeah, but
can
when you say
understand
that,
when well, I mean,
like that's not really that messiness is the point. I don't think excuses, like, first of all,
mhm,
there's no, yeah, the story. I mean, the story of the making of Apocalypse Now has overtaken the film itself. It's almost like the thing people are into is the everyone, everybody was there for years and millions of feet of film were expended and this disaster happened and that. I mean, it's one of the great stories about the making of a movie, undoubtedly. But there's a certain objective viewpoint I think you can have when you do read about the making of so many films, and you understand the business of it, which is also what I'm as interested in, is the commerce and the art. Like those two have to coexist. That's the whole reason there's an industry. And I love where those things collide or fall apart or
mhm.
are at odds. Those are always great stories, and those are the books I love to read. And so for that, I love Apocalypse Now because it's got some of the best versions of that you can ever have. And a similar thing is true for Nashville and for Altman, who's always butting heads with the studio and some of his actors and people who don't quite understand what he's doing. He didn't really understand what he was doing either. He's kind of winging it a lot of the time, and he's going on an instinct, which is a great thing for a filmmaker to trust, obviously. And it doesn't work all the time, but there's kind of with Altman, because the stakes don't feel quite as high. I think it's more, um, even when it's not really working, it's going in a direction that you can kind of wrap your arms around. Like his take on Marlowe, I'm a huge crime fiction fan as well, and so his Long Goodbye, is such a it pissed off so many people who still feel so attached to that character and can't believe what he did with it and what Elliot Gould was doing and what a travesty it is to sort of have this take on Marlowe. And I'm like, I love that stuff just because Altman is kind of thumbing his nose uh, at convention,
Mhm.
and he kind of can't help himself but do that. And I think that's the high wire act, I guess, that's fun to watch, even on films where maybe it doesn't always come totally together. Um,
Sure.
and Nashville is a bit like that. It's kind of a shaggy dog tale, and I'm interested in exploring how and whether the town deserved more, less, better treatment because it's not a definitive statement on the town of Nashville or country music. And there's all these interesting choices that were made that that I think will be interesting to talk about with Rick about what he was trying to do, what he did, what it ended up saying, and the place that it occupies in kind of our collective film memory of Altman and of country music, because it did become kind of a definitive statement about it, even as it wasn't really intended to. So I like all those kinds of questions, unresolved though they may be.
And so from the point of where you're watching now, more with a critical eye or approach
Mm-hmm.
to executing your podcast episode, like what goes into that preparation though?
Mm.
Because it feels as though you've got, like, again, to go back to, let's say, the Warren Zevon episode, it feels like you sort of have a trail there,
Yeah.
and a destination, and you're able to tie things together pretty well. And that's one of the things that I was impressed by, and that
Mm.
has drawn me to listening to a bunch of your podcast episodes.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as I'm watching, I'm definitely taking notes. I don't have a very efficient means of doing this,
So
but maybe
so are you sitting right where you're sitting now, and you're just
no. I'm all over. I could be anywhere. Probably the one place I'm not is here. This is just in my corner of my office where I have my podcasting stuff, and I do my Zooms and things of that nature and record the episodes. But
yeah. Mhm.
no, I'm watching, either at home or on my laptop or wherever I may be. And when I'm watching to take notes, it's a different experience than when I'm allowing myself that first watch or rewatch without taking notes. When I'm taking notes, I'm stopping down. Something happens in the film that sparks something, and I just jot that down.
Mhm.
I could be in a theater doing that. I did that when I saw uh, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. They were doing a screening at the Paris Theater, so Amy Heckerling was there, and I was at that, and I took some notes in the theater because I wasn't going to be able to remember the things that she was talking about in real after the fact. So I do take notes. I try to organize it, but I find it generally becomes pretty unwieldy because I'm just doing them like in an email that is a draft email, and I'm just putting things about characters or themes or stuff that I'm kind of want to reference later, and I kind of end up with this fairly large and unwieldy email draft, which I then attempt to put into some kind of order, which I don't feel I always do very well. I always feel it's a little bit meandering, and I'm kind of sometimes at tension with the idea of just doing things in the order in which they occur to me while watching the film. Like maybe that's more of an
Mhm.
experience that someone will have if they're drawn to go back and rewatch the film, which I think is kind of always what I have in the back of my mind as I'm talking about it. I like when people talk with great specificity about specific weird or cool moments in a movie and things that actors are doing. So I want to try to put as much of that into these things as I can so that people are inspired to go watch that clip of Zevon and Letterman and think, yeah, it is such a weird energy that's going on there. Or, wow, now that I know that, Warren's not really being totally honest with Dave in this moment,
Right.
it's kind of fascinating. I wasn't aware of that before. So I'm kind of looking for those types of things to always put in.
But yeah,
And
so you go into the episode with a structure of sorts?
I'd hate to call it a
You say
structure because
a
that
loose
implies
skeleton, like a skeleton of something?
that implies a put togetherness that I really don't feel that I have. So
Huh.
I guess what it is I make all these notes, and in making them, maybe I'm retaining them so that when I
Sure.
record, uh, it kind of comes to mind without just sort of reading it, so it's not like I consult them during the episode per
You're not.
se, other
Okay.
than I might scroll through it, or I do keep the links that I want to play sometimes in that document. So if I'm recording, I will have it open, and I'll be able to click on a link and then have it played into the episode in real time, so I don't have to cut it in later.
Oh, good. Okay.
But I don't. Yeah, I think I wish I was more organized about it, but I don't, but I also don't, um, I also don't, I also don't make myself do that. You know, I kind of research until I think I'm ready. And I think
Yeah,
being ready
really.
feels like I could just talk about it with
Right. Well,
some,
again, I guess like anything, you develop some sort of muscle
I
to be able
guess,
to
yeah.
a talent for it's like public speaking or something of that, where
Yeah,
you
which I'm
just
horrible at, by the way, which I would be, I cannot, my breath tightens. I
really
can't
well,
breathe.
yeah, but that would,
I
like I
would,
said, but that over time that would
no,
also
I don't think that would ever, I mean, I'm 54 years old, Adam. If it hasn't
eh,
gone away yet, when is it? It's
well,
not, it's
depends how
just,
much you do.
no, I don't think it would
You,
ever,
if you do it
I
once
don't
or
think it
twice a
would.
year,
I'm a
like
class,
I
I'm that introvert extrovert, right?
okay,
Um,
yeah.
I can be extroverted here into the microphone talking to myself, but
Mm.
if I had to do this in front of a crowd of any number of people, 10 people,
Wow,
I would have a hard time doing it and getting through it.
interesting. All right. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. 'Cause I feel like, I do so many Q&As over the years, hundreds, and I just I would, initially, probably before I started, I was nervous about talking, but I just got
No,
figured it
I
out, and then
completely
I
seize
did, like,
up.
live TV stuff, and I
I wouldn't be able to
realized
do it.
that with the producer talking and a
Yeah.
teleprompter and things like that, and I realized, oh, it was psyching myself into it. It's just like, "Oh, this yeah, I could do this,"
Yeah.
"Anybody can do this. People do this that are more intelligent than me, so
Sure.
I can master this, and if I flub it a little so nobody cares, you just make it funny, you know?"
Yeah.
So, that's how I got good at most of the things I do, is just I would kinda
Well,
fake it
but
till
you
I make it.
perform too. So I mean, you play music in
Yeah.
front of people, which
Oh,
is even
well
more revealingly insane to do as a
well,
concept. So
except that you can also hide,
it's true. You can hide
there's
behind
a
it.
little
Yeah.
hiding behind the persona of,
Right.
and about the music, it's about the song and the music, so I try to, I do a little
That's
bit of
true.
things, right? Yeah, but,
Well, I think also like my mind is always active. If I'm in an
uh-huh,
environment, that's why I think the talk show thing is so fascinating for me to watch because if I was in an environment like that, I would be participating in it, but more of me is observing it and than it is paying
mhm,
attention to my participation in it. And the same
mhm,
thing would be true if I was speaking at a movie screening or something, or I would just
yeah,
be thinking it's the same. It's kind of like I always joke. I mean, I'm a huge Grateful Dead fan. I've gone to a lot of concerts. I just went to their Barton Hall show at Cornell University on Monday night.
yes, right,
And I was with a friend of mine who I've been going to shows with for almost 40 years. And, there's always a lot of crazy shit going on around you at a Grateful Dead concert. There are people who've had too many drugs who are
sure, sure,
hitting the floor. And like,
right,
there's just general craziness. And you kind of have to learn to tune that stuff out and just focus on the music that you're there to pay attention to. And other people who are more new to it, you can see like a guy literally passed out next to us, and it was like a whole thing for 25 minutes with EMTs and like
oh my gosh,
and a lot of people just like stopped paying attention to the concert, of course, and were just, oh my, look at this human drama that's taking place here at the concert. Whereas my friend and I, who had been to, innumerable of these concerts, sort of just knew like he's being taken care of. There's nothing we can do about it. We're just going to
right,
keep our attention over here. But I wouldn't have that ability in a public forum. And I think that's where I start to seize up. Sometimes when I'm talking to people on the podcast, I seize up too. When I've had guests, like people who write books, things of that nature that are, where I feel this pressure to do something that their publicist is going to feel good about after the fact or whatever. It's like, I can feel that I have
yeah.
to remind myself to breathe,
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
that's definitely happened to me too, when, where I've just that's when I realized, okay, you really, even though I'm real prepared, I still have to kind of jot things down on occasion.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have the comfort level, like, okay, if you're gonna get Werner Herzog on, for Pete's sake, write things down. But
Yeah. I mean,
he goes, well, I never would write anything down. I suppose talking to
see, Werner is probably one of those guys that where you would be you're just in his world. So maybe these worldly concerns that I would be having would
yeah,
just disappear because you can just go where he's going. Like he's not probably going to do the basic PR type interview, right? Like I don't know if he's capable of doing that, or does he sell the goods as he knows he has to, you know? Like,
Well, I don't think he ever feels like he has to do another interview, but if he does, you better, you know, if he's going to put up with you, you better kind of know what you're
you better
asking,
have
and
some, yeah.
don't ask him his favorite color. Although,
Where do you get your ideas for your films,
yeah,
Werner?
right, exactly.
Um,
Uh,
Chris, my co-host Chris, in the early days, he went to this amazing thing, which was Herzog was doing a thing at a hotel in New Jersey where you like pay to have this seminar with him over a day or two, which sounds crazy. Like it sounds kind of like those Brando acting lesson things from
oh,
the
right.
80s. So I always thought that was. I wish we had explored that further because that sounded just kind of amazing.
Hmm. So what was so when to set this up as we wind, we'll have to wind things down, but set it up for me. So when you were recording like an episode, like let's say, where did you do? What were the circumstances of when you recorded the Warren Zevon? It felt like you did it in one shot.
Yeah, it's one shot.
One
I've
shot. That's
gotten.
just miraculous. And then what were the circumstances? Where were you? What was
I
the
was right here.
lighting?
I was right
You
here.
were sitting there because I thought I asked that before. I was wondering if you do them just sitting at your desk there, and you
Well, no, I do them
not if you
here.
were,
I record them. I
yeah.
don't watch the movies here, but I do
No, no, I
record here now.
understand.
And
Right.
since I got, I have this Rodecaster Pro 2 mixing
Yeah,
board, which believe me, 2 years ago would have been so far beyond my technical capabilities. But what's been amazing about using something like that is you can record in real time. You can play your clips into the recording in real time. And
sure.
then you can just
Yes.
go back and spend so much less time taking out your ums and ahs or your guests'
Well,
ums and
there's
ahs, which
AI
is,
now. There's AI apps for that too, by the way.
are there? Yeah, no, it's starting to.
Yeah, well,
We
my
have an AI,
producers
we have an
did
AI
it.
surprise in our forthcoming episode, but
Okay.
yeah, I think that'll probably be a technology that will end up becoming useful. But yeah, I try to do it. You know what? I'm really conscious of how I listen to these things and what I want, and so I try to make it a a fairly seamless experience for the listener, even though they may stop and start. Because obviously, if I'm doing Zevon and Letterman, it's like shit. I took 2 hours. I don't really want to take 2 hours, but I kind of had to take 2 hours. So,
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth it
oh,
because
thank you.
what you're achieving is I think something very special. And
Oh, thank you so much.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
I do record it in real time here. Um, I found if I did try to, and I've tried to go back and re-record things, but it just doesn't sound the same. And then to my
yeah.
perfectionist ear, I'm like, I'm just going to stay with the messier version. I try to have fun with the mistakes that I make sometimes. I think in the Ted Jessup one, I was so definitively right in my own mind that it was Richard Romanus, not Robert Romanus, or that they were brothers. And Ted was, of course, right, and I was wrong.
This
Now,
is the guy
this is
from also,
Damone. The guy who played
yeah, this is the
Damone.
guy also from Mean Streets, and
Yes, correct. And so, you know, rather than like, which I have done in the past, record like a little post episode disclaimer to be like, Ted's right, it was Robert Romanus, and they're not father son, they're brothers. Like, I just
yeah.
sort of I put a little like needle scratch or something, and then I used a program just on Google Voice or whatever where you can type words and it will speak them, and then had the Google Voice speak the correct answer, and then I cut that in and put like a little ding ding sound effect, and I tried to make fun of the fact that I was so definitively right when I was completely wrong. So
Mm.
uh, yeah, I just try to do them in real time. I mean, I just think that's the best for what I'm trying to do. That sort of works the best. And also time management wise, it's like, okay, I got an hour and a half or 2 hours where I can do this. Like this is gonna be what it's gonna be. So I think that trying to be prepared helps. And then once we start recording, or once it's ready to record, like, which I think is a big part of it, then I just try to let it flow um and have some room for spontaneous diversions as they arise.
Well, the name of the podcast is called Full Cast and Crew, and it's hosted by Jason Silo.
Yes, you got it right. Thank you.
Thank God. Um, I
No one,
should. I've listened to enough episodes
I probably
where
don't say it. I mean, that's again, I'm like so bad about it. I mean, I don't even, I mean, I think I say it now because I actually, one of the things I do write down is because I realized like I had never intro this thing and never tell people what it is or
yeah,
who I am
yeah,
or any of that stuff. So I started
right,
kind of saying like, I'm your host, Jason Silo.
yeah.
That's about as much as I give away there.
No, I don't do much more than that either.
Yeah.
I'll give the day and the episode number. Just
I should do that too.
feel free. Feel free to take. You don't have to give me credit
I'll
or
take your
anything.
suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is episode 153 of the Full Cast and Crew podcast. I'm your
Yeah.
host, Jason Cilo. See, that's the kind of thing that I will take that suggestion, and then I will have to go down a little diversion to give you credit for it. And then it's sort
Oh,
of like that's part of the
well,
whole thing, you know?
it's not my idea, but feel free to mention. uh, this has been great, and I would um, love to do another one of these at some point because I want to also learn more about your other parts of your life and about your company and all. But you know,
Anytime.
I have
Anytime.
but work beckons. Man, it just doesn't seem fair.
That's the way the world works. I
Working
know.
for the man.
Well,
But
listen, we'll both be here doing our thing, and our paths will cross again, I'm sure. So I really appreciate you having the interest, and in what will certainly be your least downloaded or listened to episode. I'm not gonna have the name recognition of a Werner Herzog or all the other actually famous people you have on your podcast. So
well, I don't. It's not about famous people. It's about the conversation. I know you're kind of. I know you know that much, but I put it out there for everybody else to know.
I'll
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah. Let's try to do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, have a great Mother's Day weekend, I guess. Or
It is right. Yes, I'm all prepared.
all right, good. Nice talking to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate it.
All right, you bet.
All right.
Have a
Bye
good
bye.